It's the latest warning from the home building industry about an impending cliff for construction.
We're seeing sales have stopped.
Somebody wants to buy my condo right now. We are in a buyer's crisis.
There are no buyers in the Canadian housing market, and it gets worse than that because the Bank of Canada might not be cutting rates anymore for the rest of this year.
It'll be painful.
At least according to one major bank. We're going to get into some diverging opinions as well between TD, who is calling an economic crisis, whilst RBC says things won't be that bad. So first of all, I just want to show you this because it kind of shows you what is going on. This realtor here says this is the most active number of price reductions I've seen in my entire career, says Mr. Bibby, who was selling real estate through the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, that kind of gives you an idea and a sense of how bad the market is right now. If he's saying, oh, this is worse than the financial crisis, and he was selling through that, so he knows. And it just gets worse than that because it says in some cases, condo owners who purchased in 2019 are looking at selling for less than what they paid. So that is 6 years of growth potentially that is being completely erased. And this is not just happening in Toronto. This is happening all over, as I covered in a video that I did last week. Anyway, 7 months later, 10% gone. So 7 months and you have seen 10% gone.
Our economy is very strong.
So it is crazy what is going on in the housing market, but it's something that we've all expected on this channel, as the housing market had turned into this speculative mania which could not last. And then Shazzy puts here, they told you Ontario homes were bulletproof. Now stale listings crowd the streets and buyers have vanished. Underwater mortgages, investors panic, mass exodus. This is the market's silent bloodbath. And he is talking about this post here on Reddit. Why is there a flood of listings in Ontario and no buyers? Again, we're just seeing the theme over and over again. No buyers in the Canadian housing market, and especially for these box condos that people have bought primarily for investments like Airbnb, and it's just turned into a nightmare for these people. But you know what? They kind of deserve it because they got locked into this euphoria of the housing market is just going to go up forever. And you and I both remember all the that we saw back in 2020 and 2021 from realtors, mortgage brokers pumping up the market, who are now calling for a crash. Completely flipped 180 degrees. They were saying, oh, that will never happen. Immigration. If you hear immigration any more times, then yeah, oh my God, yeah, like immigration. Yeah, it's just going to go up and up forever. And that bubble is also bursting. So in a normal world, I would assume that people selling a home also need to buy another home to live in. But that assumption seems to be wrong because there are a lot of homes for sale and not a lot of buyers. Why is everyone selling but not buying something else? Are people underwater on a mortgage, offloading investment properties, leaving Canada, turning into renters? Where did all the buyers go? And this is the thing, time and time again, for the past 3 years, I have been pounding the table on this and saying that it has been investors that has crowded out the housing market. You even saw this happen, and it's still happening to a certain extent, in Calgary and Edmonton. Whenever you see these massive amounts of euphoria, rents rising, narratives behind it, everybody's moving to Alberta, the immigration bubble's going to continue forever, whatever it is, you just put these things together. People think that is okay. People think, oh, that's fine, Luke. Everybody's moving to Phoenix because it's so nice and sunny here and whatever, and it's just whatever argument. We see these arguments time and time again. Those of us that think like investors, we know that people are going to come up with different arguments to justify themselves and say, hey, there's a reason, Luke, why these prices are going up. It's because of this. It's because of immigrants. It's because people are moving here because the sun comes out. It's retirees
The list can go on forever.
And it just creates a melt-up in the housing market, and speculation just thrives off that until eventually there's no more dumb people to buy, and then it all just kind of implodes on itself. And especially that just compounds the issue if the economy is also worsening as a result of this housing bubble bursting. I mean, it's just this vicious circle that the economy is in right now. And RBC here is saying Canadians looking for more interest rate relief might be out of luck. So they're saying that the Bank of Canada isn't going to be cutting anymore.
It's a 4-quarter recession. It'll be painful.
Royal Bank of Canada's forecast goes against the other big 6 banks, but it argues that much has changed since those chilly days in March when Canada faced the catastrophe of the Donald Trump 25% tariffs. And then it says how the average tariff rate has dropped and how things have changed. But they are thinking that the economy in both the US and Canada is a lot stronger than it really is in reality.
In fact, in scenario 2, the U.S. economy goes into a recession. If the U.S. economy goes into recession, that's going to further weaken demand for Canadian goods and services.
And I would put my bets more with what TD is thinking, which is actually that the economy is in complete right now, and it's going to get a lot worse. Even though they'll never say that, you can kind of tell by reading what they say here. So manufacturing slowed, the GDP report that came out last week or the week before. TD economists said the downside risks to Canada's economic growth are beginning to manifest, especially in tariff-exposed areas. And I can take you to this, and this shows what's going on with the economy here. So you can see Canada's GDP contracted by 0.1% in April, a manufacturing slump. Now, this doesn't tell the whole story because, again, the big component of GDP that they don't report on is the government. The government influences a lot of spending in the economy now. So if the government is constantly increasing their spending, then that can mask even other sectors that are declining. And we know that that is the case. And that's why these figures kind of can't be trusted anymore. And that's why also these figures that Canada hasn't been in a recession since 2022, even though productivity has been tanking, even though GDP per capita has been in a recession since 2022, is somewhat laughable because it has been in a recession. Anybody who has just monitored what we've monitored on this channel knows that. The desperation is out there and people just want to leave. They want to get the out of Canada because it's turning into a depression, which is something I've said many times. It's going from recession to depression. By the time they call a recession, it will be in depression. And that's really this year, unfortunately, what's happening. So take a look at this. Construction down for GDP in April. Manufacturing a right slam down, as you can see here. Real estate actually rising. So real estate actually kind of pulled up the economy a little bit in April. And they're expecting that May is going to be a complete as well, likely another decline in May, and that will put Canada in official recession territory, especially when you combine that with the rising unemployment numbers that we're seeing also. So it's just getting a lot worse. And you know, the fact that interest rates might be held here at 2.75% could definitely happen because inflation is still pretty high, relatively speaking. Month over month prints have not slowed down that much at all, especially on core inflation, which is one of the Bank of Canada's primary things that they go and look at. So really, you've just got to think about it. Where is this economy heading? So many debt slaves right now are just hoping that interest rates go back down to zero, not realizing that if they hit zero, the economy essentially is dead. There's nothing happening. And likely they will be on some sort of receiving end of that economy dying to a point that it's going to affect them also and offset any interest rate cuts that they see. And that's likely to happen because the Bank of Canada is only going to cut if the economy gets even worse. And we already know how bad it is. It's funny because RBC put out this report saying it's the most affordable in a few years, basically, since this massive mega bubble formed, and the housing bubble really has been going on for 2 decades now. But when you look in the past 3 years, yeah, home affordability has improved, but just take a look at these numbers because I just think they're absolutely crazy. So the share of income a household would need to cover home ownership costs percentage. In Vancouver, it's 92.7%. But get this, nowhere in Canada is it less than 30%. So all places in Canada, if you're buying a home, you're going to be spending more than 30% of your wages on home ownership costs. And the Canada average is 55%. So when you've got averages that are this high, people have to understand and realize that there's been massive amounts of fraud in the housing market. And that's part of the reason why we're in this market right now, why there's no buyers, because banks are starting to tighten up their lending practices, which means all these funny mortgages that were written, which is meaning that they're checking more on references for people's mortgage applications. They're checking on people's incomes. They're doing things that they were not doing in 2021 and in 2022. And that is a massive difference because obviously with the amount of fraud that we've seen in the housing market, it does obviously not bode well for the future in home prices. And then a recent Reuters poll came out that Canada home prices may decline 2% extra as this trade war hits home buyer confidence. But, you know, I just find this insane because at the end of the day, it's going to be way worse than that. And 2% is just kind of completely ridiculous at this point. From the peak, we're already down more than 16.5%. So it just shows how bad this housing market is getting. And there's no signs really that there's going to be any improvement anytime soon. And really, like I've always said, you've got to look at that economy to see how that's doing, because if the economy is doing well, then you might see that translate back into the housing market. But that is only going to happen if the banks are more willing to lend, which is likely not going to happen at the stage we're at right now, especially with the amount of people that are defaulting and are in trouble in Canada. And there's a massive amount of people that are hidden who are in trouble and they are completely fucked and they're on the verge of losing their home. So Canada home prices are set to decline 2% this year and stagnate in 2026, a significant downgrade from expectations of a modest rise just 3 months ago. This is according to a Reuters poll of property experts. So, I mean, it's interesting that that's what people are thinking, but you've also just got to imagine what's going to happen if there's a massive amount of stimulus that is injected into this economy. Is it going to affect the housing market, or is it going to continue to decline? Those are things that you sort of have to weigh up. And I do definitely think that more stimulus will be on the way, but really the housing market is much larger than the Canadian government. So their ability to control it and manipulate prices is actually more limited than they would have you believe and people would believe. So it's interesting to say the least. So the Canadian housing market, in summary, not in a good place at all. So anyway, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And then if you're looking for a VPN and also want to support the channel, you know where to go. Links are in the description. ExpressVPN. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.